Hello and welcome. This is Preeti. Today I'm using this beautiful stem set and I'm just going to create a spring wreath card, and I'm going to use some really bright and cheerful colors to make this wreath card. So I'm starting off with this large paper white cardstock, and this is Bristol Smooth white cardstock because I do plan to use some watercolor pens for this, and I'm going to stamp this large wreath from the stamp set, and I'm going to emboss it using some white embossing powder. Now this is a large wreath, so I had to stamp a couple of times in order to get a good impression. Also, I'm so sorry because this is a white on white and the Watermark ink is a clear ink. It's hard to see it, but I promise you it is there, and once I start adding the colors, you can actually start seeing the development of this wreath will start coming forth. And here I'm just heat setting this wreath with my heat gun. I just wanted to create a very floral spring wreath. It's been so cold and dreary here in Minnesota, and I'm so ready for some spring colors and some cheerfulness. And I thought, what a nice way to just add those cheery colors on the cardstock, just to make you feel a little happy, I suppose. So I hope as you're watching this video, you feel the same way as I feel, cheerful and ready for spring. Anyway, so as I said earlier, I'm using some watercolor pens, and this is Zig watercolor markers. There are other kinds of watercolor markers in the market. There's Arteza as well, which is a little cheaper than the Zig color markers, and they pretty much work very similar to this. I happen to have the Zig color markers, and that's why I chose this. So I'm coloring, starting off with this larger pink flower here with some lighter pink shades, and I've gone ahead and colored all the pink flowers. Oh, in fact, I forgot to tell you, I did stamp some additional single pink flowers, or that shape of flowers, just to add some more pink color to my wreath as I start building up. And then I started adding the second flower in this wreath in a red shade, just to give it more like red peony or a red rose look. I think when the illustration of this card, actually even those other roses are, or the flowers are also the same flower as the pink flower, it's just that they're facing in different direction. But I wanted this wreath to look like full with different kinds of flowers and buds and things like that. And that's why I chose to add some red colors as well onto this wreath. So I've used, as I said, very cheerful and bright colors to create this card. So here I've taken a really deep red and then a lighter red, and I'm blending those two reds with a clear pen or a blending pen, which also is a part of which you can get to buy with Zig watercolor markers. And then I'm just kind of blending those inks using that blender pen. Now I'm going to continue adding colors to all of my red flowers. Now be careful when you're adding these colors that you don't smudge. I did smudge here and there, but it didn't matter because eventually I was going to die cut it and it was perfectly fine. But make sure to kind of keep some kind of protective paper under your palm, arm when you are coloring, so that you're not lifting up the colors from the images that you are coloring. And what I did there was I just took some clear watercolor brush pen, or just what you call the well brush, and I just lifted up some extra red color that was on my white embossing powders here and there. So that just to make that flower center to pop up. Anyway, and then I'm continuing here to color those buds or the fillers of this wreath with some yellow colors. And once I'm done with the yellow colors, I'm going to start coloring the leaf part of this wreath. And for the leaf part, I just chose a few 3 shades of green colors, a dark, a mid-tone, and a light. And then I shifted between the two. For some of the leaves, I used only the darker and the lighter. For some, I used just the mid-tone and the clear pen, and for some I used the darkest and the lightest. So that kind of gave a few variation with my leaf in the wreath. So you can really choose just two green colors and mix and match to create different variation or hues of that same green color. And here you can see I've finished coloring the entire wreath, and I've taken this coordinating die set and I'm going to die cut this wreath using the largest one, and the single flowers I'm going to use the coordinating die which comes from the single one. And I like this die because it also cuts the center part of the wreath, so so I really like that works out that way. And here you can see, and I've gone ahead and die cut all of the elements, and I'm just going to keep these aside. And those pink ones I cut to add some additional fillers. As you see, my wreath doesn't have enough pink flowers, and that's the reason I made some extra pink flowers for my wreath. And here I'm just going to take a top folding note card, white note card, and I'm going to adhere this wreath to the right edge of the left edge of the note card, and it's going to, so the wreath is going to hang out a bit, and I'm going to cut off that additional hanging out bit eventually. And then I'm going to add foam tape. Is just to see there me adding foam tape just to one side of this wreath, as you can see there, so that I can adhere it on the side which has foam onto the note card, and where there's no foam I'm going to cut that extra bit off. This is a large wreath, so you can actually make a large 5x5 square note card, or you can actually even use stamp multiple wreaths all around a background and create a background of wreaths on a slimline die, and it's going to look beautiful. That's probably what I'll do sometime in the near future. Anyway, here you can see I'm just cutting off that extra bit of that wreath which was hanging over on the edge. And then I'm going to take those pink flowers which we colored and die cut, and I'm going to add it additionally to the wreath. And this time I'm not adding them all just over the wreath, but I'm also adding some of them peeking from underneath the wreath, just to make the wreath look quite fuller than what it is. I mean, the wreath itself, the illustration of this wreath is quite full already, but I just wanted to add a few pop-up elements onto this wreath. And now I'm just finishing off with the last one on that corner, and that pretty much completed the wreath aspect of it. And then I've taken two of these inks. This is a yellow and a corally color, which matches the colors that I've used on the flowers, and there's this dotted stamp in the stamp set, and I'm just going to add it randomly. It's not dots and bubble kind of a stamp, a cluster of dots and bubble stamp, and I'm going to stamp that using some with the yellow and some with that coral color, just a few splattering of them here and there around the wreath, just to add a little interest to the white background of the note card. And my hand slipped, and I got a little smudge on the note card, but it didn't matter because it looked like a dot from from that stamp. Anyway, so I've taken another white piece of panel here, Bristol smooth paper again, and I'm going to just add some colors, some red and the coral pink that I used, the corally pink that I used for the flower, and the yellow color. And I'm just going to create some bands using the color, because I'm going to use them to stamp my sentiment for my wreath. So here I'm just adding that pink color and making sure that my sentiments that I'm choosing fit in that little strip that I have colored. And then I'm just going to add the yellow one as well. And then most of my inks are kind of drying. I do use this ink pens a lot, and I think it's time for me to buy some additional pens to kind of replace these really drying up ones. So here you can see I'm scrubbing it really hard to make sure I get the color, and once I have them ready, I'll be ready for embossing. And here I did make a mistake. So I placed my sentiments, as you can see there, to start stamping. I went ahead and stamped this using Watermark Watermark ink. Of course, I used my static buddy to remove all the static, and then I just added the Watermark ink and I went ahead and stamped it. And then when I went to pour the ink, the embossing powder stuck all over that color because the color was still wet. You can see there, and I was like, oh, did I just mess this whole thing up? Because I tried cleaning it up, but I just couldn't. So what I did is I just went ahead and removed the powder completely, and I heat set. I suddenly remembered, oh, I kept the sentiments in the misty in the same place. I had not removed it, which was surprising for me because I usually remove it immediately, but this time I did not. So I got a little lucky there. So I'm just testing. I just embossed it, added, and then I added the white powder again, and I see it's still sticking. The paint is still wet, so I went ahead and heat set it once more, and then I added some embossing powder again on it to see if it was still sticking. And this third time, it did not. The powder came off easily. So then I realized that the ink is absolutely dry, and I was ready to stamp. And you can see that the powder is falling off pretty easily. And then I just went back into the misty and I restamped those those sentiments. So keep in mind these, if you do emboss it over these colors, make sure that the ink is absolutely dry before you add the embossing powder and heat set it. And you can see here now it all worked out. Eventually, it all worked out perfectly. So, so that really. So when I was making this card, it was really funny. At the amount of mistakes I made, but I did not want to chuck the card. I was like, no, I was determined to finish it. So I kept going. So I just want to encourage you to, if you make mistakes, it's all right. You try to find another way to to keep it, to kind of make it work, because you do put a lot of work into making these cards, and then you don't want to just keep throwing away all the work. And now sometimes you cannot salvage it at all. At that point, yes, you have no other choice, but most of the time you can salvage the projects that you are working on. So anyway, I just went ahead and added those sentiments with some foam tapes right in the center of the wreath, and I didn't want to add black strip with white sentiment, which I usually do. I wanted to keep everything bright and colorful, and that's why I chose to create the sentiment panels using the same colors that I used on the wreath. And then to add some added interest to the wreath, I added like a bunch of jewel stones all over the panel. But then as I was looking at it, I realized that the white of the wreath was not really working out for me. So what I did, I just took a light aqua pen and I went around the wreath wherever wherever the white was seen on the die cut, and then I just blended that off with some watercoloring pen, and that created the wreath to pop up of that white background. Otherwise, it was white on white, and the wreath was not standing out as much for me. And now you can see how beautiful that wreath looks and how beautifully it pops up from the white background. And here is the completed look of this card. I hope you enjoyed the spring wreath. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.